Hi Vedika, you're going to be talking to us about some allegations that have surfaced online alleging that Donald Trump has been blocked from using nuclear codes against Iran. Talk us through what is circulating.
Well, Sharon, former CIA analyst Larry Johnson alleged on a podcast this week that Donald Trump wanted to use the nuclear codes against Iran, but that he was blocked from doing so by General Dan Caine, the chairman of his Joint Chiefs of Staff. So let's take a listen now directly to those claims that we heard in this podcast this week.
They had an emergency meeting Saturday night. And apparently, well, one report coming out of that meeting at the White House is that Trump wanted to use the nuclear codes, and General Dan Caine stood up and said no. He invoked his privilege as the head of the military, so to speak. It was apparently quite a blow up. There are pictures of Caine coming out of that meeting with his head down to the ground.
So as we heard there, he described that interaction as quite the blow-up, and he went on to say that there's some very bizarre things going on in DC. Now, this all comes as concern has mounted over Donald Trump's unpredictable behaviour and conduct, both in public speeches and also online with the images that he's been sharing. We've all seen the AI images he posted depicting himself as Jesus. We've been covering a lot of those incidents here on Truth or Fake. But lawmakers, recently some even in Trump's own party, have been vocal, Sharon, in their doubt that Trump is fit to serve due to this erratic behaviour.
And Vedika, is there actually any truth to these allegations? What exactly do we know?
Well, CNN reported that Dan Caine, Pete Hegseth and other top US officials were pictured arriving at the White House on Saturday, 18th April, the date that Larry Johnson claimed this meeting took place in that podcast. Also in that podcast, as we heard there, he claimed there was images of General Caine leaving the White House, storming out, head down to the ground. And this is the image that was shared in that podcast. However, this idea of that Caine stood his ground does clash with the reality of the command chain. Caine is an advisor, he's not a commander, and technically nobody has the authority to overrule the president's decision. So that does make it difficult to verify this claim, as there are no credible reports to back up the allegations made by Larry Johnson. In fact, even himself, he has posted since then on his blog saying that he has no confirmation that the report is verified. But what has been reported is that there has been some conflicting ideas between General Dan Caine and Donald Trump. In February, Trump took to Truth Social to say that in Dan Caine's opinion, if the US was to strike Iran, it was Dan Caine's opinion that it would be something easily won. But that's not what Dan Caine allegedly told Trump at the time, according to the Washington Post. According to its sources, Caine had in fact cautioned the US president about attacking Iran. He had expressed his concerns about the scale of the campaign and potential US casualties, shortfalls in munitions, etc. The New York Times has also reported about Dan Caine's muddled responses about Trump's threats to Iran, particularly that one about wiping out an entire civilization, saying that despite being Trump's top military advisor, Caine has struggled to answer questions about the president's war rhetoric. Now, there's also been reports that Trump was in fact intentionally excluded from the Situation Room during the recent critical operation in Iran to rescue US airmen there. According to the Wall Street Journal, Trump was in such a volatile state that, I quote, he spent hours screaming at aides in the West Wing. Military officials made the call to limit his access and update him only when needed on the phone. So whilst we don't have proof of verified nuclear strike intent, there does seem to be a gap here between the US president's rhetoric and the stance taken by his Joint Chiefs of Staff. And I think that's really what has fanned the flames of this story, Sharon.
Vedika, thanks so much for that.